Medicine webinar series. My name is Jessica VanRoo, and I'm the executive chef at the UCI Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. Before we start, I want to review a few Zoom housekeeping items. We are recording this session. After the session, we will post this webinar on our website along with the recipes to download. Everyone will remain mute to limit distractions during the presentation. After the presentations, we will moderate a Q&A session from the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please take advantage of the Q&A feature to address questions to our panelists. The Samueli Institute Culinary Health webinar series is a workshop based on the UCI School of Medicine Culinary Medicine curriculum. Each class is led by a UCI Health SSIHI provider and includes a demonstration from me based on a relevant daily meal plan. Our previously recorded classes, presentations, and recipes are available. For more information, please visit sssihi.uci.edu. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Michelle Luhan. Michelle is UCI Health registered dietitian and nutritionist with the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. She is certified by the American Dietetic Association and a certified dietitian and nutritionist who is a member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Michelle also holds a Master of Science degree in clinical nutrition and food science from New York University. Her clinical interests include integrative health approaches to heart, kidney, and lung health, diabetes management, eating disorders, women's health, weight management, and digestive disorders, including inflammatory bowel diseases. She offers individualized and group nutrition counseling and works with patients to develop customized, easy-to-follow programs to help them manage their health conditions, lose weight, lower cholesterol, or feel more rested and energetic. She's also fluent in French, Italian, and Spanish. Michelle sees patients in Irvine, Laguna Hills, and Newport Beach. When she's not helping patients achieve their health goals, she enjoys surfing, skiing, and hiking, as well as cooking for her family and friends. Please join me in welcoming Michelle.
Thank you, Jess. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, that was some introduction, and this is really fun and nice little departure from the clinical practice. So thank you for leading our culinary science arts and for helping us all with our food and food prep. Today we're going to talk about diabetes, and diabetes is something that obviously many of us are hearing about every day, more and more. It's becoming a really big problem, not just in America, but globally. 25% of Americans have diabetes, and so many don't even know they have it. So when I talk about diabetes, it's really the diet that we should all be on. And essentially, it's a diet that's going to help manage your blood sugars, because diabetes is when your blood sugars go up. And so I'm happy to talk about it today, and then maybe we can kind of get into the foods and see how. Let's see if I can get my next slide going. Ooh, why is that not working? Bear with me here. I'm not. Okay, for some reason my slide is not going to, oh, here we go. Okay, so basically 3 types of diabetes. Most of us hear about type 1. It's the most popular, most common in adulthood. And usually it starts to hit us when we put on too much weight and our pancreas can no longer work and produce the right amount of insulin to help lower our blood sugars. Type 2 is found, type 1 is the one that is when you're a child. Type 2 is the one I just mentioned about what happens in adulthood. And gestational is when, you are pregnant and maybe your body is just not able to handle the load. And so your pancreas or maybe your insulin is not received as well. So you get a little high blood sugars when you are pregnant. So those are the 3 types. So type 1 is when you're born with it. Type 2, adult, usually when a little more weight gets put on us. And the reason why we talk about diabetes is because we don't really get sick from diabetes per se, but we get sick from the diabetes related complications, and heart disease being the primary risk factor, stroke, neuropathy, nerve damage, foot problems, even gum disease can present when your blood sugars are too high, kidney disease, eye disease, blindness, and even some bladder problems. So, really addressing the diabetes, getting the blood sugar under control, ideally with diet is sort of our goal here. And, overall, what can you do? Well, my go-to words would be fish, beans, and greens for people, just wanting sort of that elevator pitch. How do I get my sugars down? Well, just eat more fish, eat more beans, eat more greens, and watch the sugars in the packaged and processed foods, right? So just losing that extra weight is going to bring down your blood sugars if you're overweight. Exercising, obviously, when you exercise, you're burning glucose. You're burning that sugar that is either stored in your blood or stored in your muscle or stored in your liver. And unfortunately, when we have too much sugar in our body, in our blood, and there's no place to store it, well, it gets stored in fat cells. And then those fat cells get really big. And when they get big, they cause inflammation. And that's usually the start of lots of other undesirable diseases. So how do you follow a diabetic diet? Well, studies are showing over and over again that the Mediterranean diet, another way of saying is more of a traditional heritage diet, is somehow all-encompassing of maybe like a traditional Latin diet, a traditional Asian diet, a traditional African diet. But basically the crux of the diet is more colorful fruits and vegetables, more fish. The Mediterranean diet is only using olive oil, nuts and seeds. And we can dig in a little bit more and talk about that in a minute. But you really want to follow a more traditional diet. So that means less packaged foods, less processed foods, less foods with ingredients that we cannot pronounce. And so with that, one of the sort of key stars of the Mediterranean diet is olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed extra virgin olive oil found along the Mediterranean countries, along the coast. You can have olive oil from Spain, from Greece, from Israel. They even make really good olive oil in California now, in South Africa. The key is to make sure the olive oil is cold pressed and extra virgin. In California, we have the California Olive Oil Council, and they have a nice little seal that they put on the bottle in the back. So that's one good way to know if you're getting good olive oil. You also want to find olive oil that's in a sort of opaque or metal container. If it's a glass container, chances are it's not a very good high quality one, because like any fats, oils like olive oil or any of the oils or nuts, they can get rancid if exposed to heat and light. So you want to make sure your olive oil is stored in a cold, cool place. And if you can find an oil that has the actual date when it was harvested, that's a really good indicator that it's fresh. So why is olive oil so good? Well, it's got lots of polyphenols, which are plant antioxidants. You always hear about antioxidants, so that prevents oxidation. Oxidation is not what we want in the body. Studies show that it's good for your brain. It's actually really good in protecting against Alzheimer's disease. It's a preventative measure. Once you have Alzheimer's, then you want, obviously there's only so much you can do with the diet, but it is a preventative measure. It can also reduce depression. Our nerves are covered with myelin, which is a fat. So it needs fat to be protected and function. It's good for digestion. It's good for your bones. So even though we're talking about diabetes, again, diabetes is a precursor for a lot of these other health risks. So we want to make sure the blood sugars are under control, and we want to make sure we're getting some of these good foods into our body to help fight disease. So hopefully you can see some of those benefits from the olive oil. And it tastes good. So the Mediterranean diet is, like I mentioned, mostly plant-based. You're going to be getting a lot of your protein from fish and seafood. And if you can't tolerate fish and seafood, there are omega-3s found in plant foods like walnuts and chia seeds and flaxseed and hemp seeds. So there are some alternatives, but we do encourage fish, several times a week. Meat is not consumed that often, maybe once a week. Poultry, eggs, maybe 1 or 2 times a week, 2 to 3, and not huge portions. We're not talking about 24-ounce steaks. It's like 3 to 4 ounces, a small, sort of the size of the palm of your hand portion of animal protein. The beauty of the Mediterranean diet is that a lot of their animals roam and they eat grass, and so as a result, their body fat composition is going to have more omega-3s, and then that milk made from, let's say, that cow that's been grazing is going to have more omega-3s, and they age their cheeses. And so even some of the cheeses like sheep and goat cheese, many of us know, like feta or Gouda, they're going to have a lower saturated fat content, and it's going to be a little healthier for you. And the aging process also sort of blocks out some of those enzymes that some people can't tolerate when they're lactose intolerant. So if you're lactose intolerant, aged cheeses can be a good alternative. So can yogurt or kefir. But yes, so these are some of the pointers, the Mediterranean diet, and the diabetic diet is essentially a Mediterranean diet. You're eating mostly plant foods. You're getting your nuts, your seeds, your whole grains, good clean protein from fish, and lots of olive oil. And the part of the diet that many of us don't always address is the socialization and the convivial component, where you're dining and eating with friends and family. And a lot of my patients will say, yeah, when I'm eating with my friends, I don't tend to eat as fast because you take your time, you put your fork down, you talk. And there is something to be said for that. So, let's watch the pace that we eat and the amounts of food that we eat. Sadly, this is more the American diet. And yes, the standard American diet is sad, and it's full of a lot of processed chemicals and preservatives and additives. And, the real caveat is that we think this is safe, and it is safe maybe in a small percentage, like less than 10%. Maybe you can have a little wiggle room for some indulgence. But when your diet is mostly processed foods, and we're seeing that in children now, like 76% of their calories are coming from processed foods. So those are a lot of chemicals that these little bodies that are growing and developing are consuming on a daily basis. And we wonder why we're getting some of the diseases that we're seeing, these diseases like diabetes type 2 in children, when in fact that used to be an adult onset disease. So really read the ingredients, be mindful of the amounts of processed foods you're eating. All right, so a lot of times people ask me, well, if I have diabetes, how many carbs can I have? How do I count my carbs? And a very simple way to approach it, again, this is a diet for everybody, is to just try to, follow the plate method. The standard half your plate vegetables, carbohydrates should only take up a quarter of your plate, and try to make those carbohydrates a little bit more complex. So by that, I mean, make them more like a starchy carbohydrate from a plant food, rather than, white pasta or just, rich crackers or white bread. So have it be plant-based whenever you can. And, you want to always think color too, like sweet potatoes and potatoes are going to be better than just white bread, because you're going to be getting all the beta carotene and the fiber and all those good minerals. And then the protein is also a quarter of the plate. So when you eat in this balance, you're basically making it more difficult for the sugar, if there's sugar in the food you're eating, to go into your cells or to go into your bloodstream first and then into the cell. So it's a little more complex. The solution is complex, and you're going to have fiber in there and hopefully some good fats from olive oil and some protein. So that will help stabilize your blood sugars and you won't get those spikes. So eat by the plate. If you want to count your carbohydrates because you're on insulin. Usually it's, 1 unit per 10 grams of carbohydrates. And then you can always read labels if you are eating packaged foods, which, we always recommend consuming less packaged foods. But if you do have an occasional cracker or cookie or treat, or let's say it's a breakfast cereal, look at the amount of carbohydrates and also look at the amount of fiber. So we want to aim for 25 grams of fiber a day for a woman and 35 for men. So, if it's got a high fiber content, then there maybe are some more whole grains and there's something good in there unless it's an added fiber. But even so, that's going to be a sort of a good snapshot of what might be a better quality food. And the fun thing about if you wanted to count carbs is just a little trick, as you see in the blue box. When you have fiber, you can subtract those carbohydrate grams from the total carbohydrate. So if you're watching your carbs, a lot of people are macro counting now with their apps. You would just, this particular food, the 1 cup portion would actually be net 5 grams of carbohydrates. So you're subtracting the 5 grams from the fiber, and so it's only 5 grams because the fiber is not getting absorbed. So that's kind of a little trick there. So you do want to get a lot of fiber in your diet for so many systems, mostly just to help blood, to help the blood sugar control, lower the cholesterol, and help with your regularity. Another important ingredient, or not ingredient, but essential nutrient is water. If you don't drink water, your cells don't respond happily, your muscles don't work, your brain doesn't work, you can't break down fat. Water is just, we can't live without water. So do remain hydrated and work really hard if your blood sugars are starting to go up, or if you know someone who has some prediabetes, to encourage them not to drink sugary, beverages. A lot of our sugars come from sodas and juices and teas and sports drinks. So, we really don't need to add those extra sugar grams from the drinks. Just drink good old water. Teas count if you want to have, coffee in moderation, and brothy soups. They all count towards your fluid intake. One last tip, and then I believe we're going to go into Chef Jess's cooking demo. A lot of people ask these days about what I think about time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. And there are a number of reports showing that they are, in fact, indicated in some cases for patients with diabetes or for patients with high cholesterol, if you're trying to lose weight. The simple fact of not eating for an extended period of time, just by virtue of not eating, you're going to consume less calories during that day, assuming you don't overdo it in the window that you are eating. But the real benefit to the time-restricted eating is that it allows your cells to sort of take a pause and your systems to sort of regenerate. We've been talking about our cells, your cells need nutrients, your cells need water, your cells need to rest. And when we just give our body a little time and not eat every minute or every hour or snacking all the time, we're also giving our pancreas, a little pause, our organs, so that it's not always having to produce insulin. And insulin is anabolic. So anabolic means it's going to put on weight. So, by not eating, you're just kind of telling your insulin to lay low, and you're not going to be storing those sugar calories. So intermittent fasting is obviously not recommended for kids. Type 1 diabetics who are taking insulin, we don't recommend intermittent fasting. People who want to try to lose a little weight, reports show that if you go a little longer and you do more of a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour feeding period, we see more weight loss. We see blood sugars go down and cholesterol go down and blood pressure, a lot of those other markers go down even with just like 12 or 14-hour fast. So just something to think about. You don't have to do it every day. Maybe you do it 5 times a week. And let's say if your last meal is at 8, then maybe you have your first meal 5 days a week at noon. You always want to make those food choices healthy and the best you can, part of like a Mediterranean diet. So myself and my 2 other colleagues here at the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute are happy to meet with you on a one-on-one, or if you wanted to just come to one of our other webinars hosted by the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute, that's great. We're here for you. If you have diabetes or kidney disease, do know that Medicare covers diabetic and medical nutritional therapy. So, use that service. We're here for you. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. I think I'm going to switch. There's a few questions in there for Michelle if you want to answer some of them. Yeah, go for it.
Is there a way to test how much inflammation our body currently has? That's a good question, Annie Mae. It's one way that we test is we have it's a Sika machine, or in-body. It uses electrical impedance, and it actually tests for visceral fat. So we can measure how much fat is inside your body in centimeters squared. And that is an indicator for us if you have systemic inflammation. There are also blood tests, like you could test your C-reactive protein. There's a heart-sensitive one. So we really don't want to have visceral fat. And that's a really good, and there are some other labs, obviously, that you can test for inflammation. In addition to extra virgin olive oil, how about avocado oil? Avocado oil is a great monounsaturated fat. It's going to raise your good cholesterol. It's great for the diabetic diet. If you don't like the flavor of olive oil, it's a good substitute. I just pushed the olive oil because of the high polyphenol content. So it's just going to have more of those antioxidants. Are grains under carbs? Yes. If I was not clear, grains are a carb. And when you're buying grains, make sure, it's always 100% whole grains. A lot of packaging will say, natural or grains. And in fact, it could be totally refined. So, but you do still want to keep those in 1/4 of your plate if you are diabetic. But they're going to be better for you if they're 100% whole grains because they have fiber. Do you want me to keep going, Jess, or do you want to move into your...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sweet. Okay. I'm gonna start, and then I'm gonna be fast. And so we fix the cameras, we think, so you can see me, hopefully. Maybe, yes. Hold on, I'm gonna stop video on this one. Okay, there we go. All right, so we are going to be making 2 different dishes. One is a summer soup. And then the other one is a massaged kale salad. That one's just fun because I'll talk about it in a little bit. But these are just ways to use some of the summer produce that you might have lying around at home. And so first, soup, super easy. This is French. And so the French like using leeks. And I find leeks are fun, especially in the summer. So I thought I would show you how to take care and how to buy a leek. So leeks are in the onion family too. They're like green onions. When you buy them, this is the only portion that you use. You can use a little bit of like the light green part, but usually you use this part. This is all for stock. So you can use it for stocks, like veggie stocks, chicken stocks, and things like that. I have not washed this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take off the portion that I'm not going to use, and I can freeze this. There's actually a couple Chinese dishes that I'll make, and I'll use that, but you have to cut it up pretty finely. And then you've got the world's dirtiest leek. So I'm going to show you how dirty it is by cutting it in half, and you will actually see how much dirt sits in the middle. So the way to clean it, it would take you forever and you'd end up with a mess if you tried to wash all of this in the sink. You could, there's nothing wrong with it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna claw my hand, pinch my blade, and I'm gonna cut my leeks. I'm splashing them, of course. And then I have a big pot of water. And in this big pot of water, I've already cut up 3 leeks. I'm gonna turn on my stove too, since we know how that goes. Okay, so I'm gonna put them all straight in here. Now what I can do now is I can go in and wash my leeks. Scallions, you can do the same thing with. You can actually do a lot of produce like this. I've worked on a couple of community farms, and when they get their boxes together for greens sometimes, they'll just get a big bowl of water and dunk the heads of lettuce inside to wash it. So I'm gonna rinse it around, and then I can grab it. I'm not gonna dump it out. So I don't want you to dump, because if you dump, you're just gonna end up with all the dirt right on top. So I'm just gonna take out the scallions, or the leeks, sorry. And you'll notice how cloudy this water really is. And the worst thing that you can get is a piece of like dirt from leeks in your soup, because it's crunchy. It's like eating sand. And that's it. Other dishes you can use with leeks, like if you're interested, because they're very nice and they're mild. Sukiyaki is actually made with a type of a leek called negi. But here you can just use regular leeks to make it, and it makes really good sukiyaki. So if you were to actually like look inside, there's a pile of dirt just right on the corner on the side right there. So you can take this water and throw it away. So I have my leeks. Also gonna add carrots. Keep the peel on if it's an organic carrot. I say carrots are one of the few things that are affordable in organic form. And if you want to peel it, fine, go ahead and peel it, but don't throw away the peel. Keep the peel and make something with it, whether it be a veggie stock or a chicken stock. I'm going to trim off the end. And if it's too long, see how it's too long for my knife, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make it easier to cut. I'm going to cut it into quarters and create flat surfaces for myself so that I don't cut my fingers. So now they're not roly-poly. I can go in and chop. You can buy carrots in a whole different variety of colors. There's white carrots, purple carrots, and again, all those different colors are the different phytochemicals from the vegetable. And then we have a ton of garlic. So I always say chop your garlic first, because that's how the allicin is going to come back together. Allicin is the component inside garlic that we're trying to get. So chop it up as early as possible and keep it aside.
So Jess,
Other things that go inside, zucchini, yellow squash or crookneck, and then regular zucchini. So for that, and zucchini grows really well. We're starting to grow some tomatoes here at the garden. At home, I'm growing zucchini, and zucchini is probably one of the easier ones to grow. So take off the ends, and yes, you can make them into, you can use them as sweet or savory. So again, I quarter it, and then I'm gonna make it into, I'm gonna cut each quarter into thirds, and then dice.
Hey, Jess, can you hear me?
And then we also have green beans. So again, just whatever you have around. It doesn't have to be these exact vegetables. It can just be what you have at home and you just want to get rid of. This soup freezes really easily. So here we go. Now, green beans are really fun. In the past, we used to have to string our green beans. They've been modified over time, so there really isn't any string left on there, but there is a tip. So if you were to actually go in and pull, there's not much string that comes off of it anymore. So what you can do these days is you can line up your string beans, green beans, and I do one end at a time. So I line them up all on one side. I tap them so that they're all equal, and then I'll just trim off this end, and then I'll cut about 1/2-inch portions. When I get towards the end and I know that I'm gonna hit tips again, I'll squish them all together on that side to get the tips all matched up, and then cut on that side. So I've got perfect beans. Green peas, white beans, and whole grain orzo. You don't have to use orzo. You can use any kind of whole grain pasta, small, and you don't even have to use pasta. You could use quinoa. You can use a whole bunch of different things. So I have my pot ready. Couple
Jessica, can you
things
hear
of
me?
oil. Actually, I had oil ready. Oops. And I'm gonna saute my leeks first. And if you don't have leeks, you can use onions.
Hey, Jess, can you hear me?
And then I'm gonna add my carrots. Zucchini. And a lot of people right now are like, what about that garlic you had chopped up? Don't worry, it's going in. I like the flavor of garlic. Depending on if you like the flavor of garlic, it'll vary on where you add it. If you like it, you wouldn't add it until the very end when you're serving it. I'm not going to do that. I'm still going to add it in now, but I've got a lot of kind of barriers that prevent the flavor of garlic from being lost. Because what ends up happening is if the garlic touches the oil, it'll seize up each little piece of garlic. So all you taste is the garlic. Also calls for some French thyme or regular thyme. I love recipes that I write that have thyme in it. So there's a few ways that you can handle thyme. This is thyme. You can thread it, needle and thread with a strainer. So all you do is you pick off one end, and then you find a hole and you stick it in there and you pull. And that way you can measure how much time you have and carry it and then mash it up, chop it up, do whatever. But that way you're not left with the stem. What's very interesting though, is that the stems of most herbs are where all the flavor is. So one of the other things that I'll sometimes do these days is I'll just grab, because we have so many fresh herbs here in the garden, what I'll do is I'll actually just put the whole thing straight in there. I can find the stems and I can pull them out then. I'm not worried about it, and I'm getting more flavor from the fresh herbs then by adding the whole stem in there. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to add veggie stock. And let that simmer. So usually I would let that simmer for a little bit, but I'm gonna finish this off, and I'm gonna add my beans and add my pasta and peas as well. And we're gonna let that cook for about 10 minutes and it'll all come together. You don't, again, freeze this if you want. If you don't want to use pasta, another option is potatoes. Like you could use purple potatoes, Yukon with the skin on. Sweet potatoes would be another option. But think about all the different things you can do. It's literally a minestrone. So it's type of minestrone, but it's French. Last component of this, though, is a pistou. Pistou apparently is just a fancy way of saying pesto with tomato. So what we're going to do, and this goes on top of the soup. No, I cannot hear Michelle. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me now?
So,
Can you hear me now?
all right. So we have basil. And if you do come to our garden, stop taking my basil. Somebody's been stealing my basil. And so basil does not grow very easily in California, I find, because it's hot and it's finicky. Basil is. We at home here, I can't figure it out. And then people start taking it too early. And now I don't have any basil left. So garlic clove, basil, all goes in. If you really need a lot of basil, best place to get it, Trader Joe's. They have the best deal for the amount that you get. Sprouts is trying, but they're not there yet. Tomato, Roma tomato, peeled if possible. It's a French thing, I understand. Why do we peel a tomato? It's mainly because the outside can kind of get in the way. It can get in the way of a bite because there's an actual texture to it. So the way to peel a tomato is you make an X on the top and then dunk it into some hot water, and then you can put it into ice water, and then you'll be able to peel it. Really, again, no real need for it. It's just a visual kind of fun trick if you don't know it already. Now I am also going to de-seed it, and de-seeding it again for visual reasons. But if you're somebody who doesn't like tomatoes, the slime, so I'm going to cut through the middle this way to get to all the seeds. If I cut this way, I'd be lost with seeds that are on that side. So I'm going to cut through the middle this way, then pop it open, and I can dig out the seeds then. The seeds and the slime are where all the flavor is, though. So if you like the flavor of tomato, you might not want to do it, but test somebody who doesn't like tomato and take that out and see what they can, if they can tell the difference. All right, that goes in. And then cheese too. Parmesan cheese, just a little bit, not too much. Grated if possible. Best place to get Parmesan, I will always say, is probably going to be not Trader Joe's, Costco. All right, so that's going to all go in, and it's going to go on high. And then I'm going to start drizzling in some olive oil. I'm getting splashed, sorry. So now you're left with this beautiful sauce that you can put on top of your soup when it's done. I'm gonna do it one more time, sorry. Little chunky. And when you're making pesto, sometimes if you want it a little bit creamier, this looks good just the way that it is. But if you wanted it to be thinner, you can sometimes add water. Always start with oil, but start using a little bit of water instead of oil, and you can get a thinner sauce too. It's the same thing I say about hummus. When you're making hummus, you have a tendency to want to keep adding oil to make it a thinner sauce or a thinner hummus. Don't do that. Instead, add water. Or add lemon if you wanted more lemon. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to, hold on one sec. I'm going to see if I can hear you guys. I'm going to try to connect on.
Can you hear me?
I will be right there. Sorry. All right, I think I can hear Michelle if Michelle talks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear.
Yay! Oh my God, that soup looks so good. And I love soup when it's cold out, like right now. Amazing. Chock full of
So
nutrients.
what I was gonna say is you can take this and make a summer gazpacho. So don't add the pasta and the beans, and then you
Oh,
can make a cold soup.
wow. Would you puree that or just keep it chunky?
You could puree it. I find cold soups are easier to eat when they're pureed.
I love it. And this piece stew is such a nice topping with lots of good olive oil and garlic, which is good for your gut and everything else. I love that.
So let's massage some kale. All right, so we have a massaged kale salad. And a lot of people will say, why do you need to massage kale? And the main reason is kale is rough and tough. And so we want to massage it so that it gets tender. The funny thing about it is, though, if you let acid of any kind sit on here for enough time, no matter what, it'll soften. So this is just kind of, it's not gimmicky, but if you want a kale salad fast, this is the way to do it. So big chunks of kale, not small, big. When you buy kale, take it off of the stem. Don't buy it pre-chopped because it's got too much stem in it. There's nothing wrong with the stem though. Pickle it. You can also make pesto out of it. You can saute it and just eat it like that. Don't get rid of it, but just don't put it in a salad. Okay.
Would you, so Jess, would you roast those kale stems or?
You could, or
They
you
won't
could
be-
chop them up and then saute them,
Oh, I
and
was
they're
just
really
throwing them
soft. Yeah.
up. Very nice.
All right. So then
I'm getting hungry.
lemon, olive oil, and that's it. We have some other stuff we can add to it at the end if we want. This is the gist of it. So I'm going to take a lemon. If you have cuts on your hand, don't do this. And then I've got lemon juice, olive oil, salt and pepper. That's it. I got my bowl of kale. Give this a good mix. And then I'm just going to pour it in. So you've got a whole bunch of stuff in there now that's going to help massage it and break it up, including salt and the acid. Don't overdo this because then you get mushy kale. So the idea is that you still want to bite to your kale. So you just go in,
So Jess,
take each leaf
oh, there you
and
go.
rub it, just like you're massaging it. Don't break anything, just kind of gently squeeze it together, literally massaging it. So like you don't want to like break your bones when you're massaging, right? You want to do it gently, but at the same time with a little bit of force. So as soon as you see it start to wilt like this, you see how it's kind of wilty? It looks like it's been maybe dunked in some water and pulled out. You're done. That's all it is. I'm going to add, you can add some cheese. So I have some cotija or feta would also work. Some quinoa, frozen quinoa. So we just make quinoa here and then we freeze it all together. So that all goes in. So if you think there's a little bit of the salt and that umami flavor from the cheese.
I love
And
that.
then mint,
Salads.
just to finish it off. And mint grows really easily. You can take my mint. Take as much mint as you want. Okay. There we are. Add that in. Toss it all together.
Hey, Jess, can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Hello?
Can you hear me,
Yes.
Jess?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so we have a couple more questions here.
Go for it.
Should I go for it?
Go for it.
Someone asked me, how does the Mediterranean diet interact with the DASH diet? Anything to modify or look out for in order to do both at the same time? And that's a really good question, because the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet are pretty much the same, except that the DASH diet is going to have a little more vegetables because of the mineral content of the DASH diet to help with the blood pressure. So, there's also a diet called the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diet. And that's actually being recommended for patients with, dementia, early stage dementia. So you can't go wrong with lots of vegetables. It's really the DASH diet is just a little lower in the animal protein. And then somebody asked about, are beans dried, soaked, or canned? Your beans.
So usually we use fresh beans in here. Fresh beans only take about 40 minutes in an Instant Pot. And the great thing is you don't need to add salt. And so you can make beans without salt. And beans are a great way to make things creamy, especially white beans like this. You can add them into butternut squash soup or any kind of soup that has a cream in it. Use a white bean instead, and you'll get that smooth creaminess that you would be missing from cream.
I have a question, Jess. Jessica, have you ever used beans in your meat recipes? I've never tried it, but I've heard that you can do like half and half.
Yeah, lentils are the easiest way to do it. So if you don't want to use full beans, you can use lentils. I like using lentils and mushrooms for ground meat. So a combination of those two.
Oh, good to know. Okay, and can I ask another question? We had someone ask about oil.
Go for it.
What is your take on vegan diets that are not using oil at all? I've seen long-time vegans that are healthy and not using oils, such as extra virgin olive oil. If I can answer that quickly without going on my whole rant on extra virgin olive oil and the health benefits, fat-free used to be the trend. And then we started to see other problems because everything that was fat-free was like higher in sugar. We have to remember that vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat soluble. So you need the fat to help absorb those vitamins. So if the vegans are not adding oils, maybe they're adding nuts or ghee or other fats that are going to help facilitate those vitamins so that they can get absorbed. Because without those vitamins, you're going to have other problems, skin issues, brain issues. So there are some other good oils besides extra virgin. We just like it because it's been studied the most and it's got the highest polyphenol content, which is probably why you're using it. And it tastes good, right?
We are. And then the other one that a lot of people will ask about is sesame oil too. I am one that does not cook with sesame oil. It's like a finishing oil for me. So I think a lot of oils are finishing oils and people try to cook with them.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But it comes up to your point of if you cook an oil that's not supposed to have heat on it, it's going to turn rancid too. It just doesn't taste good.
Yeah. So like the smoke point, you mean like you shouldn't. Well, what about so olive oil is going to have a lower smoke point than maybe avocado oil or
something. And so that's why in here we usually just carry those two oils, avocado and the extra virgin. We used to do grapeseed, but then grapeseed it's cut through with a lot of stuff, just like the olive oil is sometimes. And so you just have to be careful with grapeseed too.
So I have a question about the soup. So, bone broth is really all the rage right now. It is actually really higher. It's higher in some protein and minerals, and a lot of people are using it as an anti-inflammatory. Would you consider swapping out some of the chicken broth for like a chicken bone broth, or what's the difference like stock versus broth?
So stock versus broth would be the clarity of it.
Okay.
I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not an MD, but it was really interesting because in one of the first discussions for culinary medicine, they were discussing bone broth and iron levels inside, or lead levels, sorry, in bone broth because you're using the bones. And if there's the lead that then goes into the broth. And so that was a concern of our first provider, Dr. Bonsall, when she was talking about bone broth and how we need to look at that a little deeper. But I use, if I'm at home, I make my own bone broth and I'll use grain-fed chicken that's like wild, so like a wild chicken.
And then the quinoa, could that be substituted? Somebody asked about different grains and
Amercian, barley, even if you're not gluten-free, really anything you can use
Yeah.
for the quinoa.
you know, what I like about the quinoa is that it's a complete protein. You know, the only other complete protein is really eggs. So you're getting all the amino acids. And, you know, 8 of those acids, essential amino acids, we have to get from food. The rest we make in our body. So quinoa is a great way to get all those essential amino acids. And it's high protein and high fiber. So it would be considered a complex carbohydrate on that quarter of the plate.
Do you use a lot of farro by any chance?
In Italy, not.
Yeah, that's why.
It's
It's so interesting because we work with schools on the East Coast, and when they write recipes, they like using farro. And then when you're on the West Coast, you read recipes and they like using quinoa. And so, but quinoa is by far, I think, a better product than farro is.
Yeah. It is interesting, different cultures, you know, even like the grains, like a lot of my patients will say, oh, when I'm in Italy, I can eat pasta and my IBS doesn't act up. And, you know, you wonder about the gluten and how they farm and the quality of the soil. And so there are so many things, so many variables that go into, you know, just the quality of our grains.
Definitely. And so the last ingredient I forgot for the kale salad was some cashews or some nuts to give it some like crunch and some kind of, so pumpkin seeds are the other thing we love in here. But yeah, I'm toasting up some cashews. Oops. And I'm just gonna put them on this and chop them up, and you can put that inside your salad as well.
What's your favorite nut?
Ooh, that's a hard one. You know, I really like pecans. Pecans.
Yeah, I like pecans. Those are really high in omega-3s.
And they tend to make you think you're eating something sweet
Yeah.
because it reminds you of Thanksgiving, maybe.
Yeah, nuts are so good, and they all have like a little extra something in them.
They do. All
And
right.
you just, if they're salted, sometimes you can eat too many. I can.
Yes.
That looks delicious.
All right. Before I start losing too many people, I'm just going to tell you about a program that's coming up. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to get you a link. Sorry. There's a DPP program, so diabetes prevention program. A cohort is about to start on June 12th. On June 5th, there will be an intro session, and I'm going to put the link into our chat right now. And if you are interested in joining, please check out that website.
Wonderful.
Ooh, do you suggest raw or roasted nuts, Michelle? Well, actually, yeah.
I mean, you can answer. I think it depends on the flavor. I mean, sometimes when you roast it, you are creating a little more heat. So you're by nature kind of interfering with the fats a little bit. A lot of people like it raw, a little more
Yeah.
pure. I go for flavor too.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That was so great. I'm gonna go make a kale salad.
Yes.
Kale's delicious.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.